That's what we do here. We keep order. The world is built on a wall that separates kind. Tell either side there's no wall. You bought a war.
You're a cop. I did your job once. I was good at it. I know.
What do you want?
I want to ask you some questions.
Aloha! This is Trinidad, the Island Man, your Island Man, coming to you live once again from beautiful Hawaii, here on the island of Oahu, bringing you, yes you, the best movie reviews on the entire island. And yes, this is Trinidad, the Island Man, your Island Man, and Thursday night, October 5th, was the premiere of Blade Runner 2049. And I went ahead and I saw it this Friday, October 6th, during the afternoon screening. And I just wanted to give you my thoughts. Those who follow me on Instagram, you already know. Remember our rating scale. Shaka thumbs up. It's good to see. I recommend it. Shaka thumbs down. It's bad to see. It's junk. I don't recommend it. And for Blade Runner 2049, it is Shaka thumbs down. Now, I know a lot of you guys will be a little upset with, the Shaka thumbs down for Blade Runner 2049. And just to hear me out, I really wanted this movie to be good. I wanted it to succeed. I thought it was going to be much better than I thought it could have been, better than it was. And, I was a fan of the original. I remember seeing the original in the theater, maybe not during its, premiere run back in 1982, but I know a few years afterwards, at the time there was, when I was growing up as a teenager, there were midnight movies. You could go in, see things like Terminator, Blade Runner, a whole host of kind of cult classics, what became cult classics, and Blade Runner was definitely one of the many fabulous shows that they had. And, and this was the original Blade Runner theater cut, and I later on, saw the director's cut, and I own the director's cut, and I feel that is a good version, and I feel that even the original is a good version, for what it's worth. And I greatly enjoyed it. I feel it's one of Harrison Ford's better performances. Definitely one of better performances of Sean Young. Now, that being said, you've seen the trailers. You know that Ryan Gosling is pretty much playing a Blade Runner. If you remember, Blade Runners are what people call those who hunt these replicants and basically kill them or terminate them or retire them, before, terminate had become, such a specific, franchise term. And again, in the trailer, you get to see Harrison Ford there, and right away, that brings up one of the many unanswered questions of the first movie. Was Harrison Ford, Deckard's character, a replicant? We know Sean Young was, and we know that she had a special, Rachel had no expiration date on her, on her body, since she was a replicant, an android essentially, that was not going to die within a certain amount of days or months or years. It was left undetermined. Possibly even living forever, maybe. It wasn't really clear at that point. But, the big gist of the thing was, a slave labor, machines being built basically for slave labor that begin to have emotions of some type, or at least become, they're so self-aware that they feel themselves to be alive, or at least want to have the chance to explore that option themselves. And definitely one of the major themes of the first movie, Blade Runner, was, struggling to survive that quest for a longer life. Everybody, us humans especially, sometimes we feel that, 100 years, is the average lifespan, for most humans, sometimes 70, 80, 90, nobody knows. But, when those days, those last days start to come, everybody is looking for more time. And that's essentially what these replicants, these androids wanted. Since in the first movie, the replicants that Deckard is hunting have a predetermined lifespan. And so it opens up into this second movie, Blade Runner 2049, very much a mystery. We see Ryan Gosling's character, named Kay. Later, he takes on the name Joe. And right away we find out he is a replicant. He is an android hunting the remnants of the old Nexus 8s from the first movie. Which, right away he goes ahead and he runs into, the guy who plays Drax's character, that Nexus 8 model, and takes him out essentially. And thus unfolds a new mystery that had better been left, untold. And now, I'll put in the title that this review is going to have spoilers, and it will, because there's no way I can really talk to you and tell you the problems that I had with this movie without spoilers. So right away, his character is taken out by Ryan Gosling's Kay, and a mystery unfolds. Now he had no idea that, he would discover what had happened. But maybe if he had chosen to come with Kay and not struggle, he could have committed some type of suicide later. He could have attacked the guards and had them kill him before they got any pertinent information. But because he attacks Ryan Reynolds right there, that area is a crime scene. It becomes under greater scrutiny, and thus, right away, they find a clue to the other replicants, the other Nexus 8s that, are having, Kay hunt for. And, so right there I found that be a flaw in itself. A flaw in the story. And the flaws in this show that give it a shock of thumbs down are not anything to do with the special effects. All those are top notch. It has to do with the story and the plot. And, maybe, Delanu, the director who did Arrival, maybe he was hamstrung by the script, but I feel that he should have had more of an ability to maybe shape it a little bit more, because it felt very much like he had just took this script and he said, well, this is what they want. I'm going to direct it this way. And, I was not on board with Arrival. I would have given that a shock of thumbs down, because I didn't enjoy it. And Blade Runner definitely has that same kind of vibe that Arrival had, in the fact that there are questions left unanswered at the end of this movie. Things not clear that really should have been clear, should have been at least answered to a small degree at the very least. It made no sense, did not increase the dramatic tension of the movie, to have it be open-ended like it is. Lately, I've read the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And I found it very, very good. It's very different than the movie. But there are aspects of the book that make it into the movie just slightly. And I felt that if for the second movie, they should have delved a lot deeper into it. Like I said, they kind of touch upon it a little bit in this second movie. In the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Deckard is confined, apprehended by another team of Blade Runners and police outside of the realm of his own police department. And he's not sure if these are replicants or if they're truly human. And they believe him to be a replicant, they make him have their own version of the void comp test, which he passes, but he talks to the other detective, the other Blade Runner, and basically he finds out that, we're working, we try to find these people, these replicants, these androids that are on the loose, and this is the test we use. And it's like, well, I'm a police officer, I've never heard of your organization, and they've never heard of him. So it's like there are two different sets, and who knows who is actually behind the real police, or who are the real police, or which police are actually real. But right away in Blade Runner Part 2, 2049, we know that all the the Blade Runners are, or at least Ryan Gosling's character, and you can assume that all of them who are Blade Runners are this new generation past the Nexus 8s. Because they say that right in the beginning, they give you a paragraph where the Tyrell Corporation, back in 2018, because of the events of the first Blade Runner, the Nexus 8s going crazy, they went out of business. And they were taken over by the Wallace Company. And so this is set with the Wallace Company, who re-engineers the replicants and makes them even greater, even better than they were before. And none of them run, and apparently none of them have an end date to their lives. And Jared Leto plays Mr. Wallace, the leader of this corporation. But he's, blink and you'll miss him. He's in two main scenes, and it's like he's quite forgettable, along with his Heavy, this replicant that is a female that he basically sends out as an assassin, and to follow Ryan Gosling's performance and to get what they need. And now this is going to be into the spoiler section of it here, and you've kind of seen this from some of the trailers, whereas Jared Leto is talking to a newly birthed or created replicant android, and he says, all civilizations are built on the backs of a disposable labor force, which the replicants are, which basically is like slavery, because they do have become, self-aware, artificial intelligent, and have feelings, emotions, you cut them, they bleed, etc. And they have that strive to want to live, that drive to want to live, as seen in the first movie with the Nexus 8s. And right away, Jared Leto says, but I am unable to create, more androids fast enough for the people, for society's demand, the labor force. So the whole plot lies around this movie in somehow Jared Leto's character, Wallace, and his company finding a way for replicants, androids, to procreate, have babies, essentially. And that's the major spoiler, because as we find out what, the guy, Drax's character, and I'll flash his name up right here. I can't remember what it is offhand. Discover is that Rachel had a baby by Deckard, by Harrison Ford's character, and she died in childbirth. And that child, we are led to believe, is Ryan Gosling. However, it turns out not to be. A total misdirect, which I think was a mistake for the movie. I think it would have been more powerful if it actually had been him. So we're led to believe in the trailers that Harrison Ford character is a replicant, possibly from the first movie, and that's why Ryan Gosling is after him. However, it soon becomes clear that he is truly human, which answers, not so subtly, the first question from the first movie that left unended. And Jared Leto kind of tries to, mess with our heads there for a second. Jared Leto tries to mess with our heads and mess with Harrison Ford's head. So he's like, "Oh, maybe you were a replicant. Maybe everything you did was determined and planned by our company. We wanted you and Rachel to meet, and you were all part of the plan." It's like, hey, go. And he just says all bullshit on that. And, as an audience member, I say baloney on that too. That makes no sense at all. And it's very clear that he's a human. He finds out that his child is a human. We find out it is not Ryan Gosling's, who grew up thinking he was a replicant, because he is a replicant. However, he has some of the memories of Harrison Ford and Rachel's, Sean Young's child, and thus that's why he believed himself to be so. But it just seems to take these ideas so clumsily and puts it into that. And so at the end, Ryan Gosling's character pretty much feels that he is, I'm just going to big spoiler here. He dies in the end, reuniting, his son, Harrison Ford and his child together. To what end, I don't know, but the other replicants, the Wallace Corporation, they feel that if they can find this child, a creation of a human with an android, an actual prodigy, a child, they can replicate it, and thus all other androids would be able to have children, which would probably likely, they'd be able to do. Yet, again, I feel it just seems to lack motivation. I mean, if the only reason Jared Leto's character is doing this, and it's not clear if his character is a replicant, he's definitely, has some cybernetic enhancements at the very least. But there's nothing with Jared Leto's character that seems to be remotely interesting. He tries to play him a little over the top, but honestly, it doesn't quite work. He's just kind of out of left field, I feel, and he would have been better just to keep him off screen and as a non-visible, non-seen force behind, the events that unravel in this movie. And again, it doesn't talk about, the serious issues of, android or replicant rights. We find out that there is a movement among replicants, that they're on the verge of war with the human society, looking for these rights, and that they're beginning to organize, but we never see any outcome. We never see any of that struggle actually play out between the two sides, which I think is a missed and failed opportunity. And again, I just feel that Blade Runner 2049 is just window dressings based on the first, wonderful movie, Blade Runner, back in 1982. They go out of their way, to make Ryan Gosling look like Harrison Ford, especially in the trench coat, as you've seen in the trailers. Kind of, he's the strong, silent type, which we find out it's like, well, okay, Deckard didn't speak very much. He was very much a loner, and we find out, well, this is because he is a replicant, but also, it is part of the struggles of the job of coming, who can you relate with? Everybody looks at him. One, he's kind of a killer, and two, he's, everybody knows he's a replicant, Ryan Gosling. So, there's no motivation for anybody to get close to him, and they actually do bring up that slur, the skin job, a couple of times, calling Ryan Gosling that, as he just walks among the streets, or partakes of his meal at a street vendor. Again, I feel that the society that they set up in this movie is left unanswered. It looks too clean. The first one had a lot more grit and dirt to it. I don't know if it was the effects or, the CGI in this, but I mean, they hardly show. Gone are the large skyscrapers, and they definitely stay more in the, in the smaller, I want to say just settlements that people are scratching a living through, I guess. And there's really not even that much of a concern of who is a replicant, who is not, because it looks like everybody is struggling who isn't, a member of the large aristocratic companies like Wallace. And as far as Jared Leto's major plot concern of, I cannot create enough or fast enough, I must have them procreate and have children, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, are you the only guy personally making all these replicants? Where are all these factories? Where's the assembly line for all of these guys? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fly. And it didn't jive with me, so that's a major glaring plot hole right there. So yes, I had to give it a shock of thumbs down. Because it didn't go into any of it. I would have liked to seen Harrison Ford actually die in this. And, and like I said, I call it window dressing because they set up Ryan Gosling as the new Deckard, pretty much. Down to the basic look, his gruffness, and they set him up directly with a Sean Young-like character, which, and try to set him up in the same manner of he's falling in love, in the same manner that he's falling in love with a character who is not real, even though he might believe himself to be real, and this other, character believing him being real. But instead of a replicant, it's, or an android, it is actually a hologram. And this is, this is all stuff that we had seen before with Star Trek, The Next Generation, with Data and his consciousness arguing for his own individuality and his own rights, all the way into Star Trek Voyager, where the holograms, gain sentience and AI and pretty much become the replicants of, the Star Trek universe, whereas, the androids in the Blade Runner universe are. They become self-aware, they feel they can feel, etc., and they want their own rights, holograms. I don't know. I didn't really buy all the way into that with Voyager, but that's kind of how I felt with this movie. And so basically it was the same themes that they hit from the first movie, and they said, oh, how can we update this a little bit? And we'll go ahead and make it like this. There's a hologram for the Sean Young character, Ryan Gosling being the Harrison Ford character, and go at it. But there's no drive with the villains seeking prolonged life. There seems to be no urgency with this, or rationale to why, androids being able to have babies would be better than continuing to have them built. Yes, you get kind of maybe the feels that Jared Leto's character, Mr. Wallace of the Wallace Corporation, is maybe wanting the next step in evolution for his creations, or maybe his brethren, as we're not sure if he's a replicant or not. He definitely seems weird enough to be. But that just seems to be undercut, because it's like, does he care enough that he wants them to be more human? Although we see that he just throws them away when they cannot, have babies. Then he fails to create one that has babies. He just, retires it right there and then. So he obviously doesn't seem to care, other than with his own, wants and desires for himself, and not for possibly his own people or his own creations. Ramblings. You've heard the ramblings of my explanation why it's a Shaka thumbs down. Harrison Ford does all right. It's just that I find it unfair that he came back, but yet they didn't bring back Sean Young. We see that the other replicants, the other Nexus 8 generation replicants, they do age. They could have had the older Sean Young come in. We do get Sean Young doing a voiceover of a body-doubled Sean Young, where she is young, because they try to once they capture, the Wallace Corporation captures Harrison Ford, they try to get information from him by using a replicant based on Rachel, actually a remade Rachel, and they do some of the computer generation to where it's her young face on this body double. It's not quite as good as the Marvel Disney stuff that we have seen in, say, Civil War or Ant-Man, but it's definitely pretty close, and they're doing a good job with it. But, on that case, if they were going to do that, then why didn't we just get a young, we could have had Harrison Ford voice over his lines with a young actor, face, done up as his young face, with Sean Young's young face, which we do see in this movie, thanks to the computer. And get the direct continuation from where, or even a few months later, maybe a few years later, of the very first Blade Runner movie. I think that would have been a more, spectacular show. That would have been where people's interests are. This movie, Blade Runner 2049, just opens up a can of worms that it's like, well, why did Harrison Ford, Deckard leave Rachel? They say because they were being hunted. That is the excuse that Harrison Ford's character uses in this movie when he says, why did you leave your wife and your child? And he goes, we were being hunted. And it's like, there was really no impression of urgency from this hunt, other than, these many years, 20 years later with Ryan Gosling, it's like, yeah, you were being hunted 20 years later. Finally, somebody came looking for you. I don't know. It just didn't seem to jive. It didn't have any sense of urgency behind it, like in the first movie where Rutger Hauer and his team is, we only have a few days, a few weeks to live left. We gotta get the cure. We gotta extend our lives. Boom, right there. It's like, here's why we're doing all this. In this one, it was like, why are you doing all this? The Wallace Corporation, they got everything. They pretty much own the world. They own the police force. They're heavy. Replicant can just go in there, kill whoever they want in the police department. Without question or consequence, and Ryan Gosling is the only person who's going to stand up to him? I don't know. There's a good story that could have been made from the pieces that they put out there, from the breadcrumbs that they sprinkle around on the trail of Blade Runner 2049. But this movie that we got, this 2-hour, 40-plus minute movie, is not it. So I'm sorry, I had to give it a shock of thumbs down. Wait till video. Hopefully there's another cut of this movie, because it ran slow. The pacing was all off on this movie. And like I said, if they had just stuck to a couple more key points and focused more from the first movie, to me, it just seemed like it's all over the place. I hope you make sense of this review. Make sure, if you are interested, if you were a big super fan of the very first, Blade Runner, see this for the $6 over at Dole, over at Regal on Tuesday, or $7 at Consolidated on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But it's definitely not worth 3D. There's nothing in here. I saw it at 2D and for full price. And there was really nothing spectacular. There are a couple of effects here and there, but nothing that jumps out that, oh yes, you have to see it in IMAX. You have to see, like I said, you have to see it in 3D. Nothing like that happens. There's nothing in there that really jumps out at you. There are some special effects. Some of the hologram depictions look nice, but they don't focus on that long enough. They don't linger on that long enough. At least in the first beginnings of Blade Runner, the original 1982, you get to see the cityscape. Here they start out in the farm, and even some of the city that you finally get to see, it seems so small compared to what it was. And it's like, how is that possible? How was the 1982 version filmed in such a larger scope than this movie? And that's the other part I didn't understand. All right, well, thank you so much for listening to my rambling. Save yourself some money. See it on Netflix. See it on iTunes. If you really want to go to the theater and see this, check it out. Like I said, for the $6 on Tuesday at Regal, or the $7 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at Consolidated. All right, thank you so much. This is Trinidad.